know that the average large IT project runs 45% over budget, 7% over time, and delivers 56% less value than expected? Wow, this is incredible. And the weird thing is that this happens even in large organizations with bigger, deeper pockets and established processes, which is could be very different than in a startups. So, knowing what happens out there in the world, what can we do if you are working in a startup and you are struggling to launch your product or complete project? Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naily Makangu from Athena Leaders. As a tech consultant and startup advisor, I will answer live all the burning questions that you have on your way to Series A+. Subscribe and tune in every week for top tips and to meet amazing guests, startup founders, investors, and more. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Whenever we look at this concept and this idea of launching products, there are so many reasons why a startup could be struggling with that. But what can we do? And this is something that I've been, struggling with myself, trying to think about what is the best way of helping as many startups out there to overcome this challenge and to kind of get to the lens where they can see the first version of their product being launched out there and really excited about what they are creating. In this episode, we are going to look at three key things. One, why is it so hard to release projects or to release your products? Then we are going to look at the cost and the real cost of delaying your product. I will then share with you some tips and advice and gifts on how you can turn things around so that you can start breaking the bottlenecks and launching your product. Let's start. And as usual, for anybody who's been out there and knows me, I always answer live. So if you have a question watching this, please put them in the comment section, find me online, DM me, whatever it is, and I'll be happy to continue the conversation with you on a one-to-one, or I will just have another session where I'm going live. Let's dive in. Why is it so hard to release your project and your product? As I've mentioned before, this is something that affects organizations of various sizes. It's not just because of you are a startup. In my experience, I've worked with so many large, small, mid-size, whatever size organization where we've tackled this. And what I've done in this episode is to talk through some of the biggest or the common mistakes or common issues that I see that can help you to identify the problem. First advice is to shy away from stopping your observation of your organization to what you see. My experience has shown me that it's usually runs a lot deeper than that. In fact, by the time I join an organization to help dealing with things that are not going really well, the level of conflict is very, very high. And because of that, sometimes issues become more personal. People forget what led us to this moment. And that's why it's really important to spend the time to go really low and identify the root cause to remove the weed from your garden. Don't focus just on what hits your face, in the way I like to put it, what is obvious, but go way deeper. It's not because there are conflict between two departments, that's the main reason. But how was the conflict created? How did it started? How did it develop? This is something I talk a lot on whenever I help people on the leadership courses and things like that about dealing with conflict, or even when I do workshop about identifying the root cause. And I'm going to share with you some elements that you can start thinking about, asking yourselves as a team so that you can go as deep as possible. One of the first things to think about when you feel stuck or paralyzed is that there could be unclear objectives or a lack of business focus. What does it mean? Well, sometimes, you might understand roughly where you are going to go, but as a company grows or in situations where people work in environments where things are a lot fast-paced, then is it clear what you are trying to achieve? Are your KPIs very clear to every single member of the organization? The other question I will ask as well, do you have conflicting goals? I work with a company where the marketing team, the biggest goal that they had was to rebrand the company, whereas the product team, the biggest goal that they had was to launch more than 5 products in 1 year. So that was already a source of conflict. But why? If you go deeper into the goals, you realize that for the product to launch the company, they really needed to use the marketing team. But the rebranding project for the marketing team on its own was a beast. It was a company that had been around for many years. So if they have to do the two, if they have to support another department, whilst at the same time they have a huge target, and of course the deliverables or the deadline for those two initiatives were about the same, that to me is a cause for potential conflict with the team and also the department leads. The other one is unrealistic schedule and reactive planning. And of course, what I've said about being able to know that you have two key initiatives or key projects in the same company, but around about the same time, they need to be delivered at the same time. What is the impact on the people, right? Even if the ownership of what being launched or ownership of the project being completed lies with one department, we work as a team. This is the whole point of a company. Everybody is involved, cross-functional teams. What are you planning in a way that makes it clear to people how they can shift their priorities, and are you setting up your team to succeed? My favorite questions to leaders is to look into whether they even know the high-level initiative. So I like to test them. I always say, if someone wakes you up in the middle of the night, which I hope nobody will ever do, because frankly, why would you? But assuming that something really happened and someone asks you when you're tired or in the middle of the night, they ask you, what kind of projects are you running in your company? Who's running them? And can I see a bit of an update on what's going on? How quickly will you find this information? Or do you need to call 3 to 4, 5 people to find the answer? That, to me, lies the problem. In many organizations, this information is not easy to find. If you can't find that information that easily, how do you know that there are projects and deadlines that are potentially conflicting with each other? The other thing to look at is shifting requirements and technical complexity. This is something that happens a lot whenever you're building a software product. As I've mentioned in the introduction of this episode, even in large organizations, they do deal with that. They do struggle with technical complexity. I am a software engineer, and when I used to work back in the day where I was doing a lot of the coding, one of the problems that we had was the complexity of the platform that we were building. And as you're adding more features, how do you do that in a way that you're not creating a tangled web and spaghetti code and things that are very complicated? If you don't understand the requirements and the requirements change very quickly, it doesn't give you the time to really think about the today, the now, and the future of your code. That is a problem that you are creating for the future, and you can even start going down in the land of technical debt that will make any progress on future release of future product even much more difficult. That's why it's really important, especially in a startup where the land will shift very quickly. How resilient is your technology so that whenever there is a change in direction and requirements, is done in a way that you follow the right processes so that you are protecting yourself, not just for today, but also for the future. Bearing in mind that in the startup world, you're probably already racing as well. Another issue to look at, and something that could stop you from releasing your product, is the team, right? Do you have the right skill sets in your company, and including as well if you are hiring externally or working with contractors? That could be a problem. Especially in a startup, sometimes it might be difficult to work with a CTO. Yet there are other options out there on how you can bring CTO advisory and knowledge in-house without having them on your payroll. And the same can apply to other roles that you might not be able to have at the very beginning of your journey. And as the company grows, are you using the right skill sets in your company for the right roles? This leads us to another problem: is poor leadership. When a company grows, sometimes you might not have the leaders that are strong enough to deal with the pace of work in a startup, to deal with the fact that things are not known all the time. There's a lot of changes that happen, but how do you drive the change is very important. It's not just about reacting. It's about being in a position where you can plan for future change, but at the same time to react positively when something that you didn't even know was going to happen. The leadership is also very important, as things that I've seen a lot is the issues between different departments. As the company grows, we probably Series A or even Series B and things like that. The stakes get, of course, higher. There's a lot of pressure internally, externally, investors, customer guests, all of those kind of things. So how are you dealing with that pressure as a leader? Are you passing it down to your team? And if you have issues or you are dealing with an issue from another department, are you tackling that from a positive aspect of we are all in this together, regardless of KPIs being different? Or does it become a fight that even the people working for you feel that there is a lot of negative conflict between the different departments or different leaders? Another issue to look at is the ownership and responsibilities. Again, as a startup grows, some people do lose their identity. In fact, when you start in a startup at early stages, you might have 1, 2, 3 people working, and it's very common for people to wear different hats. The roles are not always defined. And I always say that is fine with a big warning. As long as it's clear where the responsibilities and ownership lies. Otherwise, you will lose accountability. I've been in situations where sometimes nobody even know who is really responsible for doing this particular thing that we need to launch the product. It's just like we work on this all together, yes, but if there's nobody who's responsible for that, how is that person meant to see potential problems coming their way? Things will slip through the gaps, and that will cause you more problem in the long run. Another issue I've seen, which is kind of my favorite one, is not having defined contracts when you are working with contractors, whether they are coming for a project, whether you are working with them as your development agency, whether they're only doing, or whether they're actually long-term. How have you defined the working relationship? Have you defined the responsibility in terms of communication? Should they just pick up the phone when there's a problem directly to call the CEO, when they should be working with someone else that could better handle their issues? Do you understand what happens if things are late, things are delayed? How are you working with them on that? This leads me to the final one that I'm going to talk about today. And yes, there are many, many other issues that we can be talking about, but I'm hoping that what I'm sharing with you will help you to even understand how deep you need to dig in your heart to find out those issues. So the winner is not having technology or software development or product development processes. Now, this is a tough one, right? The nature of a startup, the nature of businesses that flows or run very quickly is to sometimes be reactive. You don't have the time to sit back and think, okay, how should we do this? You feel like every minute of every day is there to remind you to move very quick, to move forward, and that could be impacting you. And if it is something that you've experienced before, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what will happen and how you dealt with that. And also, thank you very much for getting a lot of comments in the chat, and that's amazing. Thank you very much for the comments. The problem with not having any kind of processes is that you are delaying, it's kind of kicking the ball down the road. You are delaying a bigger problem that will happen in the future. Remember that it takes years to grow your business. And of course, the people who are working on building your software might not be the same people that will maintain it 6 months down the line or a year down the line. If you have no documentation to understand your tech stack or to understand the technology that you are using, to understand the design the design of what you're building, think about it this way. Is it even possible to kind of start building a house without having a drawing or drawings of an architecture? So if you don't have that, how do we know the maximum load that the foundation can take before it breaks? Yet in the development world, I see that times and times again. And of course, if you're thinking, oh, but maybe if I'm a tech founder, I will know what to do. Well, there are some tech founders out there that know what to do, but they just never written this down, maybe because they wrote the code, or someone else did, and because there's a lot of things going on. So this is, for me, something that's really, really important. And I believe that solving these issues will help you in 2 different ways. One, to kind of make sure that whenever you're bringing your more people in the team and you are growing in a way that is more sustainable. You're spending less time on training, and you have up-to-date information, and you're also protecting yourself. I kid you not, I've worked with people who didn't even know how to log in into their own systems, right? They don't know what the passwords are. They don't know what the code base is. Well, that could be an issue because you've paid for that code. And if you can't get access to that, where are you putting yourself? The second one, and I think that's the one that's more important, there is a time where you are going to start asking for investments. And of course, when you are doing the first stages of your pitch, the emphasis is not so much on the technology, especially if you're early stage. The emphasis tends to be on the product, the market, the idea, the vision, the team, and all of that. There is a time, though, if an investor or a group of investors are interested in you, they will do the due diligence process. And as part of the due diligence process, they would love to see a little bit more about how you structure yourself internally, right? And that's where it falls between the cracks. And in fact, if this is something that you've seen a lot, do let me know about it, because I'm working on something really exciting to help you to improve the maturity level of your company in terms of the technology and the product aspects. How can you answer a question that investors haven't even answered yet when you're putting together the document for the due diligence? And that is my mission. So it's something I'm really kind of excited and really want to work on. This is something that you've struggled with in the past, or you think, wow, actually, so I would like to find out more about that, then find me. You can find me on LinkedIn, DM me anywhere, or put a comment as #Athena Leaders. And I'd be more than happy to talk a lot more, do a live on that, and share with you the exciting things that I'm working on. And I love one of the comments that we got on the live. Yes, having documentation is such a time saver. Yeah, from my own experience as a software engineer, when you start writing them, you're thinking, oh, gosh, do I really have to do this? But when you find a bug or there's a problem or you need to build on the architecture, I'm always grateful when I go and I start working with someone and there's documentation. I'm like, thank you. I know where I'm starting from and I know where I'm going to go. I hope that just, going through this up to what we've discussed in this episode is helping you to see that what you see in terms of the reason why you think your product is not launching, it's just the high level in the surface, and you need to dive deeper. Now, you're thinking, how do I do that, right? How do I dig deeper? If you know any startups out there that are struggling, do share with them this video, because they are probably asking themselves, how do I do that? And I do promise you, I'm going to let you know all the goods and the ins on the solution that I use time and times again whenever I work with companies and startups that are struggling. One more key ingredient, a little bit more that I'm going to give to you before I give you even more of a gift or more of a solution. What is the real cost of delayed product? Now, this is something that I love to, especially when I've got your attention, I love to talk about, because sometimes I find that a lot of pressure can be, the pressure is not shared with the entire team, because people don't communicate the impact of not launching the product to everybody in the team. And I believe that it's important to talk about that, even if it's not something that is easy to talk about, because it helps your people and your team to really want to be behind you and ask the question, how can we help? How can you take a seat back? What do we need to look at differently? So whether you are working on the release of your product's first versions or managing multiple releases or initiative in your company, there comes a times where a lack of progress or really obviously a lack of productivity becomes a thorn in your heels. How much money are you losing by delaying the product's live date? There are some people who already have customer lined up, others not, and they're really relying on that first version of the product to increase the valuation of the company, get investors, and make money. So it's important to know that, yes, we are late, but there is a monetary impact. But of course, you know that. Everybody always think about the money. What I love to ask or to think differently is to think a little bit about the credibility. Do you worry about losing credibility in the eyes of your investors or of your customers? That is really, really important. Some customer might have paid for the product and they're thinking, oh, I actually thought that this was a really nice startup. I really wanted to back them, paid for this upfront, nothing is happening. What happens then? And worse, when you start losing credibility in the eye of the investors, because one, you're delayed, you're late, and two, you don't have a plan for it. I've been in situations where I've seen the board of directors become even more involved by taking decisions that they technically shouldn't have, which in a way could be a problem on its own that needs to be fixed. But sometimes the relationship with the board and investors become a lot more sour because of the lack of productivity, and the frustration is the communication, right? So when we think about this idea of struggling with not launching, again, something that you might want to add and to work on: are we communicating well with our investors, our customers, so that they know that problems are happening and that you have a solution to deal with those? The other one, when we start looking about the credibility, is the worry about the damage to reputation. So I'm asking you, are you worried about the damage of your reputation that will make, and if it's going to make future rounds of fundraising much harder? Right, because that's always in the minds, especially of startup founders and the business development teams, those who are involved as the company grows, to go out and ask for investment. The last one, I always talk about creating this workplace playground. So I cannot end this episode or this section when we start looking at the cost of delayed product without addressing the people. At the end of the day, the people make your startup. What is the impact internally on your people when they are working so hard on something? There's a lot of confusion in the business. They don't see the end and they start feeling demotivated. A lot of people join startup, especially at the early stage, because they are passionate about going on your journey and following you on your vision. Yes, people do know that as early stage startups are fast-paced and there's a lot of challenges. And even as the startup grows, there's still this element of really wanting to get into something new and exciting. Yet, when you feel this sense of despair, this sense of what is the point, and this sense of, oh my God, we never know what we are doing because there's a lot of changes, that affects people's morale. There is a lot of things that you can do. You might not be able to control the rate of change because it's dictated by the market per se, but you are responsible for how you are introducing those changes, the processes internally, and what you need to do to create this workplace playground. Now, before we go on to the final section on how to break these bottlenecks, I'm going to answer one of the questions that we got. So who's the right person to assign to oversee documentation and processes in an emerging startup? Oh, that's a very interesting question, because as we said, in a startup, everybody tends to be quite busy. So who is responsible for looking at documentation? For me, I would say, who's the person that has the best knowledge in the area they're working on? So that's their role to update the documentation. So, for example, actually, rephrase that. It's their role to make sure that the documentations are up to date, even if they might not be the person updating it themselves. For example, if you have a CTO, it's important for them to make sure now and again that the documentation for what is being built is there somewhere. I will assume that whatever you start building a part of your software, there will be a design document. So if you're working with a CTO, whether they are in your company or not, and there are no documentation on designs, ask yourself the question, hey, what are you going to do about this? It doesn't mean that the CTO will be the one writing it. They can have other people that are working with them, like senior engineers, senior developers, but at least they can make sure that these areas is looked after. And if because of the amount of work that they do, they might not have the time to do it themselves, they can still delegate. But the buck needs to stop somewhere. And I also think that whenever it comes to the organization in general, do have someone that works and to support the founder, whether this is a COO, chief operating officer, some people call them head chief of staff, anyone that looks at the operations. Again, they don't need to work with you full time, but someone that the CEO can tap on and says, now and again, review every 6 months or so, are we following the right processes? Especially when you are launching new processes, please have one person who's dedicated to make sure that things work the right way. But as you keep going with new ideas, new processes, remember that we are all human, including myself. And you might start with the great intentions, but life comes in the way, right? So, I do that a lot for a lot of the startups I work with. Small things like, for me, it's really important to have the right communication channels. And if someone sends me an email with information that should have been on Slack, I will just send them a message and says, could you please send it to me in Slack? That's my way of enforcing processes. I don't like to have attachments. If we're using Confluence for documentation, why are you sending me attachments? If we've decided that before we close the project or we finish a sprint, we want to have XYZ documented and updated. If it's not done, then it's my question when I work with a team to ask them why it wasn't done and what you can do about that. So another question that we have, thanks for the question, is this. My theory is how to start, and also if it didn't work as I wish, what can we do about that? Well, how do you start? Especially if this is actually a really good question, because if you've been working for such a long time, there's this thing about, do we need to pause the work when we have customers out there waiting for us to launch, but we know we're struggling, we know that this gap, do we have the time to do that? Well, for me, the first thing I would say, definitely start by creating a project and bringing the team together. And we're going to look into that more into this section, how to break these bottlenecks. And I will share with you step by step a guideline on how you can really start and bring everybody together. And the second part of the question is, what if it doesn't work, right? What if it doesn't work as I wish? Well, the thing is, in life, we're never certain on everything. But one thing that I'm certain of, if you never start, you will never get there. The important thing whenever you're trying to change the fibers of your company, whether it's the culture, the processes, is to make sure that you regularly review that. The way I ensure this review happens, when I work for a company, especially when I work at the high level of the company, then I make sure that whenever there's a meeting with all of the head of departments, there is a section, even if it's once a month, where we ask ourselves, how are things going, right? Just ask yourselves, we've sat there, we've defined those processes. Are they working for you? Are they working for us? And I also encourage managers to ask the same question to the team members, so that if there are issues that they can't resolve at their level, they can bring it up to the chain of management, right? So it's important that as you are working on this, once you've launched the new ways of working and you're turning around the corner, ask yourself the questions, is that working? And if not, what do we need to change? Thanks again for the question that we've had. Again, if you're watching this on replay, you're thinking, oh, I've missed the boat, she's not going to answer my question. Don't worry. You can find me online. You can find on my LinkedIn or put a comment in these videos. We regularly review comments and then track you down if you can find you and answer, or we just do another live. Now, on to the last part, how to break these bottlenecks, which will also answer the question that many people are thinking about, how do I start? I'm going to say this first. There are no silver bullets, right? Whether you do it yourself internally, whether you bring in contractors or consultants to help you through the project or to do this, there are no silver bullets. It will take time that you also have to borrow from the other things that you are doing. That's for sure. But remember, if you don't do this now, what is the real cost of the delayed products, right? Investing time in reviewing where you are, polishing your weapons, your processes, and all of these kind of things, putting the right structure in place will get you back on track so that you can start releasing the delayed product, start working on clawing back and getting more of the credibility that you've lost, and so that you can really start seeing the excitement in the face of your people again and start healing in the company. At least we can both agree that the last thing a CEO wants is the board jumping in and making technical decisions for the business, right? So if that's the case, what can I do? I suggest a 3-step process. The first one is a thorough assessment and understanding of the root cause of your organization. So what are the problems beyond the surface level? If you want to know how to do some of that, ask yourself the questions that I've mentioned as part of the first part of this episode. I also have a checklist and a guide that I'm going to share with you that can help you on doing some of that. The second one is planning, and the third one is rolling out, right? Again, how can I do that? Now, let me share with you a guide that I've written that can really help you to go through this step by step. Okay. So this is something that I've worked on just to help startups to really go deep and really, you've been coming, a lot of people have been following me, watching my lives and stuff like that. Some of the answers in as part of this guide and some of the exercise that you need to do, I'm sure there are lives that will have touched that as well. But one thing that I haven't shared with you yet was kind of putting everything in one document for you to go and says, okay, this is where we are and those are the steps to go through. So we looked at the cost of delaying your process, how the guide will help you. But essentially what I've done in this guide is to start looking at the different stages that gives you checklist, guide, and also a bit more information on how you would do that, right? So that it's not just, okay, yeah, checklist, go and tick, but how do I do that? That's kind of really important. It's really important to do the first part, which is an assessment of your product, an assessment of where you are, an assessment of where you feel stuck, which is the first part, which are called the 30 days. Now, in order to do that, you need to bring your entire organization together. You need to organize workshops. You need to do some interviews to find out a little bit more. Don't worry, the guide will show you for the first 30 days how you can set up that work. And the reason why it's 30 days and not shorter, so it gives you time to work on this whilst you are doing everything else in the company. Then we look at the 60 days. That's where we start looking at replanning everything. And that's it. That's a lot of work. Depending on what you found, the root cause, how can you replan around that? So replanning the product based on the new processes and everything else, but also how do you redefine the processes? Because that's, we talked about documentation earlier. What is the plan around documentation? So the point of the 60 days is to look at, of course, launching the product that's delayed. What are the more realistic dates? What is that we need to do? But at the same time, how do we do that in a way that makes sure that we are resilient for the future so that we don't end up in the same state? I work with organizations where when I've started putting this in place, they were a bit reluctant and says, oh, but we don't have the time to do this. Can you just replan? I'm like, yes, I'm responsible for the product team. We are going to go with our engineers. We are going to replan. Don't worry. That is something that we're doing. But whilst they're doing that, or we're doing that on the side, I'm working with the marketing team and understand the root cause of the conflict with the marketing team, which was linked down to all the way to documentation. And we start thinking, how can we plan a new process of communication between the two of us? Then I go and work with the sales director and I says, okay, there are some issues here because the sales team is really frustrated because they keep on changing the dates when they're speaking to clients, to potential customers. So what can we do to reduce that so that you guys are aware of what's coming up, not just now, but down in the pipeline? So this is why it's important that in the second block of the 30 days, you think about not just a project plan per se for the actual product that's being released, but how to be resilient in the way that you communicate so that you don't fall in the same space. And the last one is, of course, the 90 days, where it's when you go out, gun blazing, you've got a new plan, you've got new processes, new ideas, and you put them into practice. Of course, that will take time because the key skills here is not just to say, off you go, that's it. Those are your processes, your plans, but you walk people through that. You make sure that they're accountable. Remember, when we all came in the room and start dealing with this, we had energy, we're exciting, and we're working on this, but life happens. And when life happens, the stresses of life happens, it's easy to go back to the ways you were working before. So that's why it's really important for you to kind of, be in this way, have this frame of mind and thinking. So there we go. There we have it. In the show notes for this, you will see a guide, the guide I've created, also the link to the guide actually. And one of my most favorite phrases is to help you to sleep better at night, knowing that you have the blueprint to release your delayed products, not just for you as a leader, but for your team as well. Now, some people might be wondering, great, thank you very much, Naily, but you really think that we have 90 days to spend to work on this? And the question, as I said before, what is the real cost of your delayed products? And if you don't do this now, when, right? If you wanted to fast forward that, one of the way you might want to do that is by bringing someone who has experience in doing this. So when I work with a company, we definitely do it in shorter than 90 days. We don't skip any steps. We go through every single step that we see in that document, in the checklist. But the difference is that I do have a lot of experience having done that before, which means that when it comes to the interviews, I know how to organize interviews very quickly. I know kind of what angle to go to start the investigation. And then I just let the information drive me deep and trickle in. I know how to do plans. I've got templates for all of the different stages and the change management. So working with me can help you to shorten the time. But if you want to have a go on your own, I'm very confident that this guide will help you get yourself unlocked, sleep better at night, knowing that you have the tools to not just deliver on this and these projects and launch this product, but more importantly, to be resilient, so that as you continue to grow your company, you have built the right foundations. There you have it. These were all the great secrets and tools that I wanted to share with you to help you to get yourself unstuck. Any questions that you have, do put them in the comments. Definitely we'll tackle them live, or I will find you, tag me in your post or in any messages. You can also DM me. And of course, if you know any startup founders that are out there really struggling and wondering, what can we do? And we have this problem, then please, the first thing and the easiest way you can help them is by sharing with them this video. They can get a lot from the video itself. And if they wanted a bit more of a step-by-step, then the guide will be there. So what I wanted to do was to have a guide that you can work through step-by-step, and also a video that you can work through step-by-step. This way combined, you will have a lot of great information. Well, this is it for me. And remember, for me, the best advice, as I've said, I'm all about the people in your company. Let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.